Okay, so this is 11:45. Let's get started with today's lecture. I hope you all can hear me, right? So today is the first lecture on pharmacology, but I have already uploaded one of the file to give you an introduction to pharmacology. I hope that all of you have gone through that file. I did send a message also about it that all students are expected to go through that introductory file before we get started with today's lecture, right? We will have another one later on, but this is the first one. So here I'm going to talk about pharmacokinetics, right? So if you have seen the introductory lecture, you already know what is the meaning of pharmacokinetics, right? So pharmaco means drugs and kinetics is all about movement. So here we are talking about the movement of drug in the body, or in other words, how our body handles drugs once they are administered. Yeah. So in the introductory file, can you all hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So if you have seen that introductory file which I have uploaded, there are various routes of administration I have highlighted, right? So you know what are the various routes by which we can administer drug to the body. So the next step is the one that I'm going to talk about in today's lecture. What happens to drug after it is administered to the body, right? So these are some of the points that I will try to go through in today's lecture. I'll talk about how drug permeates and disposes of in various parts of the body. What do we mean by first pass metabolism, bioavailability? Those are certain new terminologies. I will introduce them to you. And then we will talk about plasma protein binding and its effects, also biotransformation, and lastly, processes involved in the excretion of drug, right? So these are the main objectives I will try to address in today's lecture, right? So this is what I explained to you. We are referring to what happens to the drug and how does it actually reach the site of action once you administer, right? So in this picture, although the drug is injected, you expect it to reach the site of action, probably sore throat. A person has a sore throat, so it must reach throat for its action to appear, right? So in today's lecture, we are going to see how does that happen. All right. Now, what are the important processes involved in pharmacokinetics? Okay, let me use pen here so that I can highlight to you. All right. Okay. So let's assume a drug is ingested orally, right? It will travel through the GIT, right? And will reach the lumen of GIT, from where it is absorbed usually via the portal veins. So these in the blue are shown the portal veins, and this portal circulation brings drug to liver. Liver is in fact the largest gland in the body, right? So it undergoes chemical changes inside the liver, and whatever drug is not metabolized or not undergone chemical processes, it gets into systemic circulation, right? So once it is in systemic circulation, it will get distributed to various organs: liver, heart, kidney, spleen, muscles, brain, eyes, etc. So what is absorption? Absorption means the how the drug reaches after administration till systemic circulation, right? All the process involved right from administration till its arrival in the systemic circulation. Now the next step from systemic circulation into organs is what we call distribution, right? Or distribution of drug in various tissues. So while drug is getting absorbed and getting distributed, it also undergoes metabolism. Yeah, I will talk about what do we mean by metabolism, and at the same time it keeps on undergoing excretion, right? So all the substances from the body must be excreted, whether it is food or whether it is drug, right? So once they are utilized, they are excreted. As happens with the food, the same thing happens with the drugs, right? So in short, we call it ADME, right? A refers for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Any questions so far? Is it clear?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Okay, so silence means understood. All right. Now, before we try and understand each of these processes, we need to know that all the drugs must cross cell membranes to undergo absorption, distribution, and any other process, right? They have to cross the cell membrane, get into the cell, and then only subsequent processes will happen. So let us first of all understand what are the processes involved in making the drug move across cell membranes, right? So here is a representation of the cell membrane. What you see here is a diagrammatic representation. So this is cell membrane where you see a double layer of lipids. So this is the hydrophobic end of the molecule. This is the hydrophilic end. So this is the one layer. This is another layer, right? So largely, if you can see, the cell membrane is made up of lipids. Now, among the lipid membrane, there are certain protein molecules as shown here. They are basically the hydrophilic substances. That means anything soluble in water can pass through these pores. These are almost like pores. Let us consider them like pores, right? But anything which is lipid soluble can easily pass through the membrane because most of it is made up of lipids, right? Certain organs, they have a very special organization of the cell membranes. For example, brain, in the eye, or in the placenta, right? And I will talk about it later again, but you just keep in mind that there are certain privileged organs in the body. Nature has provided them an extra defense mechanism so that external molecules find it difficult to enter, for example, brain, eye, and fetus, right? So here, what happens is that the cell membranes, they have very tough adhesions among them, right? So it makes molecules difficult to pass them across these barriers. We usually call them blood-brain barrier or blood-retinal barrier in the eye or placental barrier for the drugs to pass through fetus. The drugs must cross these barriers to reach those privileged parts of the body. So what are the processes involved in the movement of molecules across plasma membranes? These are the four main processes, right? Passive diffusion, facilitated diffusion, active transport, and endocytosis. One by one, I will explain to you what are these four processes, but just remember the one which I have highlighted here, passive diffusion, is the main means of transport of drug across membrane. Most of the drug cross cell membrane by passive diffusion, but in certain situations, certain drugs may follow other.
Doctor, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, doctor.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you still see the slides?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, doctor.
So did you hear me talking on this slide or no?
You cut off right towards the end of the passive diffusion.
Okay, all right. So what I was trying to explain here is these are the four processes that drugs follow to pass through the plasma membranes, right? And among the four processes, most drugs follow passive diffusion. Okay, so let us try and understand each of these processes. Now, when we talk about passive diffusion, I'm sure you can recollect from your science classes in school, what do we mean by passive diffusion? I'm sure you have learned in physics classes. You know, when molecules move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, this is known as passive diffusion. Right? So the same thing happens with the drugs. When the drug particles, they move from area of high concentration to low concentration, we call it passive diffusion. And this is a process that doesn't require energy expenditure, right? So this is how we can represent passive diffusion of drugs that are lipophilic. I'm sure you understand the meaning of lipophilic, isn't it? Do you? What is the meaning of lipophilic and what is the meaning of hydrophilic?
Doesn't lipophilic refer to a substance that is soluble in lipids, or is hydrophilic?
Exactly.
Sorry, is it attraction? Isn't it attraction?
This is solid. Yeah, philic is it's lipid loving, right? Hydrophilic is water loving. That means they dissolve in the lipid part of the membrane and pass through it easily. Hydrophilic molecules have to pass through those protein pores, which I showed you on the earlier slide. Only the water-soluble small areas of the membrane, only those are the areas through which hydrophilic drugs can pass through. Am I making myself clear to everyone?
Excuse me, doctor. Question.
Sorry?
Is lipophilic and hydrophobic interchangeable?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
They're the same thing. Hydrophobic means the one which doesn't like water. Similarly, lipophobic and hydrophilic are similar terms. Is it clear?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Hi,
Okay.
doctor, could you repeat that about what you said about hydrophilic and like the last thing you just mentioned?
Lipophobic. Phobic is like phobia, is something that doesn't like, right? And philic is something that is loved, right? So lipophilic is lipid loving, and lipophobic is substance which doesn't like lipid. Same goes for hydrophilic and hydrophobic.
So lipophilic is the same as hydrophobic?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Right? In this context, yes. All right. Okay. So most of the drugs that we use in clinical practice, they are either weakly acidic or they are weakly basic. Right. This is very important concept that you have to remember here. They are either weakly acidic. They cannot be highly acidic or highly basic. For obvious reasons, isn't it? It is going to corrode the body if anything ingested or administered is highly acidic or highly basic. Yeah, it will damage the body. So most of the drugs that we use in clinical practice are highly weakly acidic or they are weakly basic in nature. And when you put them into a medium which is acidic or alkaline, they undergo ionization. I'm sure you understand what are ions. Ions are the particles which carry an electrical charge, either positive or negative, right? So acidic, weakly acidic or weakly basic drugs, they tend to ionize in the medium which is acidic or alkaline. I'll talk about it later again, right? So what is the consequence of this ionization? The consequence is that part of the administered drug remains non-ionized and part of it gets ionized, right? Let's say if you have administered 100 molecules, part of it will be ionized and part of it will be non-ionized. Yeah, I will explain to you how that proportion happens in the body, right? So at the moment, we just understand that partly it will be ionized and partly it will be non-ionized. So the non-ionized parts of the drug molecule are generally lipophilic, right? And ionized parts of the drug molecules are generally hydrophilic, right? That means that non-ionized molecule will be easily absorbed, whereas ionized molecules will find it difficult to get absorbed, right? So let me recap what we have learned so far. I have explained to you what is ADME, yeah, absorption distribution. Oh, sorry, ME. It has there's a typo there. Yeah? Absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. I also explained to you lipophilic drugs cross cell membrane more easily compared to hydrophilic drugs. And then I told you that if a drug is lipophilic, it is more likely to get into brain. This one I didn't explain to you, but again, the same concept applies here. When there are barriers, they are better crossed by the substances which are lipophilic in nature for obvious reasons, right? And also I told you that non-ionized drug particles are more lipophilic and they cross the cell membrane much more easily compared to ionized drug molecules which are hydrophilic in nature. Any questions so far before I move on?
So sorry, doctor, in general, are lipophilic drugs more readily absorbed?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now let us try and understand how the pH affects the ionization of a drug, yeah, because ionization makes a whole lot of difference, right? Because as I said, non-ionized drugs are better absorbed. So let us see how the ionization of status of a drug changes with the pH of the body, and why it is important, because you know that in the
Sorry,
Doctor,
Doctor, I think you're
excuse
muted
me,
again.
Doctor, someone muted you.
So this is happening by itself. I don't know why this is happening. Huh? Okay, let me go back to the slide. Yeah. Okay, so here we are trying to understand the effect of pH on the ionization of a drug. All right. Why it is important? Because our different body compartments have different pH. In the stomach, the pH is acidic. In the blood, the pH is around 7, whereas in the intestine, the pH is alkaline, right? So let us try and understand what is the effect of pH on the ionization of a drug. So what you see here is HA is representing a weakly acidic drug. Why? Because A is the drug particle, H is representing proton, right? So this is a representation of an acidic drug. Now, acidic drugs will ionize into a proton and a negatively charged drug ion, right? This is the usual way how the drugs ionize, and the reaction is always in equilibrium, right? And you know, by definition, as I told you earlier, this is the form of the molecule which gets easily absorbed, whereas in this form of the drug, it will get poorly absorbed. Now, let us consider this drug into an acidic medium, right? So look at the upper panel here, on this panel here. Now, let us assume that the environment is highly acidic, such as in the stomach. That means you would expect that in the medium, there are a lot of H ions, right? The concentration of protons will be high in an acidic medium. If this side of the reaction has higher ions, you can expect the reaction to move in the other direction. That means the concentration of the drug in non-ionized form will be much bigger compared to its ionized form in an acidic medium, right? And this is easily absorbable. What happens for this drug in a basic environment? In a basic environment, you would expect that concentration of H ions is relatively low. If that is the case, the reaction will shift into this direction, right? That means more of the drug will be in the ionized form, which is poorly absorbed or relatively has got a relatively lower absorption. So what in essence I have explained to you on this slide is that if your drug is a weakly acidic drug, it is better absorbed in acidic medium. Am I making myself clear?
Sorry, doctor, I just want to ask. So this environment will refer to the outside, is it?
For example, cavity of stomach. Yeah.
Okay.
Into the gastric juices, what is the pH? pH is very low, isn't it?
Yeah. So that
Our
means
gastric.
that means the environment will be inside the organ, right? Not outside the organ.
No, I'm talking about here particularly the lumen of an organ when we are talking about absorption of a drug, right? I will explain to you about the blood and other compartments as well. But at the moment, let's consider this in the context of drug absorption and various pH in various parts of the GIT, right? So when I say acidic environment, I'm mainly referring to gastric lumen, where the gastric mucosa secretes a lot of protons.
Oh, okay. I see. Thank you.
All right. We will try to understand from other perspective as well later. All right. This does make a difference in terms of excretion as well. I will talk about it in a short while. Yeah. So let's first understand the concept. Yeah.
Miss.
Yes. Go on.
Over here, you stated that acidic drugs are better absorbed in acidic medium. Is it just acidic drugs, or generally drugs itself are better absorbed in acidic medium?
No, it is mainly drugs which are more acidic in nature.
Okay, thank you, Miss.
Yeah, because the pH of the medium, as I said, or pH of the lumen of an organ makes a difference to its status of ionization, right? And the ionization, if it keeps the drug into non-ionized form, it is better absorbed. Am I making myself clear now?
Wait,
Yes.
Okay.
Doctor,
Yeah.
so if I'm understanding this correctly, it means that because the drug is negative base, if it were to go into an acidic environment, it would go into its non-ionized form and therefore be better absorbed because it is lipophilic. Is that?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean the predominant form will be non-ionized. I'm not saying that this particle is absolutely zero. What I'm saying is the predominant form will be non-ionized, and non-ionized form is lipid soluble. Very simple concept to keep in mind.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
Okay. So let me apply the same concept for a basic drug. Right. So basic drug actually it's alkaline in nature. It will tend to bind with the proton and the product will be ionized. Right. So once the product is ionized, it will not be absorbed, whereas drug which is not bound to proton is easily absorbed. Here we are talking about a basic drug. Now let us see again what happens to the ionization status of this drug in an acidic or a basic medium. So when you put this drug into an acidic medium, for example, in the lumen of stomach, there are a lot of H ions, right? So the reaction is moving into this direction, giving you a lot of ionized form of the drug. Whereas in a basic environment, the reaction is moving into opposite direction because there are relatively lower number of protons, making the drug particles predominantly in the unionized form, right? So opposite is happening here, and I can conclude that basic drugs are better absorbed in alkaline medium. Here it is exactly opposite to what I explained to you on the previous slide. I hope it is clearer. Okay. All right, let me move on. If you have any difficulty, we can come back to it. Okay, so now another parameter often mentioned in relation to drugs is the dissociation constant. So what is dissociation constant? It is briefed as pK. It's also known as pKa. So what is actually pKa? pKa is equal to a pH at which the drug is 50% ionized and 50% unionized. That means the amount of ionized and the ionized form of the drug is equal. That pH of a drug is known as the dissociation constant or pKa. Now, if we are talking about an acidic drug, if the pH of the medium is less than pKa, your predominant form will be unionized form. The same thing which I explained to you on the previous slide, whereas at higher pH than pKa, that means the alkaline medium, more drug will be ionized. And the opposite will happen for the basic drugs, right? So let me explain this concept again with the help of the example of a drug which is aspirin, right? Aspirin is a weakly acidic drug. Okay, now pKa of aspirin is around 4.5. Okay, so once the person ingests aspirin, it goes into stomach where the pH is 2, yeah, much lower than the pKa. So what happened at this acidic pH to this acidic drug? The reaction is driven to the unionized side. That means if let's say if there were 100 molecules of aspirin ingested, 99 of it will be in the unionized form. Just one or very partial form of the administered drug will be ionized form. And as I said earlier, this unionized form gets easily passed through the membrane and get into the blood. Now, what happens in the blood? In the blood compartment, pH is 7.4, right? Which is much higher than the pK. Right? So here what happens, the reaction equilibrium is driven to the opposite side. That means predominantly aspirin will be in the ionized form. Now this ionized form cannot cross the blood membrane as easily, right? So what is the consequence of this? Aspirin is now trapped in the blood. It cannot move back into the lumen of the gut, right? So this is how the drug is getting absorbed and trapped into the blood, and we call it ion trapping. You will hear about ion trapping later again in various pharmacology lectures. And this is the basic concept that you can keep in mind. Is it clear why the pH and the status of dissociation and association of a drug with protons is important to understand? Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Oh,
doctor.
okay, great.
Miss,
Okay, let us
Doctor,
try and yes.
sorry, doctor.
Why, go ahead.
Yes, go on.
Why can't the aspirate go back into the lumen?
Yeah. So once the aspirin is in the blood, right? The pH of the blood is 7.4, which is much bigger than the pK of the aspirin, or it is more alkaline, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So at the alkaline pH, that means there are lesser number of protons, right? So the reaction is going to move into this direction, which gives you a lot more aspirin in the ionized form, right? And as I explained to you earlier, ionized forms do not cross the membranes easily, right? So it is stuck in the blood. It cannot move back into the stomach. Clear now?
Miss, if it doesn't,
Thank you.
if it's in the blood, it goes to the kidney, to the liver straight, is it?
Yeah, once it is in the blood, it will be carried first to the liver. I will explain to you about how the distribution takes place later. At the moment, let's just understand how the drugs cross cell membranes, right? And how the pH makes a difference.
Okay.
All right. Shall I move on?
Sorry, doctor. What if pH was more basic? Like, what if it was an 8 or a 9?
Do you think we have this kind of pH in the body?
No, but what if there was a complication or something that caused the pH to rise or something? Or is it possible?
Yeah, so the body has some compensatory mechanisms. Yeah, if let's say a patient has alkalosis, yes, of course, the drug distribution is going to change because of the changes in the ionization status. Yeah.
Yes,
is that all right?
All right, doctor. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so let us try and understand, test ourselves and see whether we understood the concept or not. Yeah. So the proton pump inhibitors, they are a group of drugs. We use them for the treatment of peptic ulcer. Once they enter into acid secreting cells in the mucosa of the stomach, they are trapped and they remain active for a long time. So what do you think? PPIs, they are likely to be acidic in nature or basic in nature? What should be your answer here?
Are they basic in nature?
Exactly, very good. So I assume that you all have understood the basic concept here, right? That means in the basic drug in acidic medium will be ionized and will be trapped there. Yeah. So we use this particular concept for a lot of drugs. You will come across this terminology, right? So here what I'm trying to do is to explain to you basic concepts so that when these terms are mentioned later, you can easily grasp what we are talking about. All right. Okay, so that was all about passive diffusion. A little bit about other types of diffusion. As I said, majority of drugs cross cell membrane via passive diffusion, right? But certain drugs can also pass through facilitated diffusion. So what do we mean by facilitated diffusion? It is almost the same as passive diffusion along the concentration gradient. However, it requires a carrier. As you can see in the diagram, there is a carrier involved. It picks up the particles from one side and brings it to the other side and releases there. So since there is a carrier involved, the process is saturable and process is selective. Saturable means if the number of transporters are all taken up, we will say that the process is saturated. Also, transporters may selectively bind with certain drugs and may not bind with the other drugs, right? So that is what I mean by selectivity. And since the movement is across the concentration gradient, the process doesn't need energy, and uptake of the glucose is one of the examples. All right, now what is active transport? Active transport means the movement of molecules against the electrochemical gradient. That means particles move from the area of low concentration to high concentration. So obviously the process requires energy. Since there is a carrier involved, so the process is again saturable. It is selective again because certain drugs can bind, others cannot bind. They can also be competitive inhibition by the co-transported compounds. That means if we are administering two drugs which are utilizing the same transporter, one drug can inhibit the transport of the other drug. You will come across certain examples later, right? One of the example here I have given is the sodium potassium ATPase. Yeah, don't worry about this. You will come across a lot of other examples. Lastly, endocytosis. What is endocytosis? It is simply eating up the particles. Yeah, and this happens for high molecular weight substances or the drugs. Drugs that have high molecular weight, as you can see in the diagram, the plasma membranes forms a vesicle around the particle and just eats it up, yeah, inside the vesicle. One of the example is vitamin B12. When you give very large doses, it is taken up by the cells by endocytosis, right? So far I have explained to you. Okay, any questions? Okay, so I take silence as understood, right? So let me recap. In addition to what we have learned earlier, additional points that we have learned so far, I have explained to you acidic drugs are better absorbed in acidic medium and basic drugs are better absorbed in alkaline medium. When entering a compartment with opposite pH, for example, acidic drug in alkaline compartment or basic drug in acidic compartment, the ions are trapped. Right? So these are the basic concepts I have explained to you so far. Let me move on now with the pharmacokinetic processes, right? Just to recap what we have learned so far, how drugs particles cross plasma membrane and how the pH makes a difference, right? Now let us talk about what are actual pharmacokinetic processes. Let's first talk about absorption. So the process of absorption, the absorption is the process by which drugs pass from the site of administration to the bloodstream. I showed you this on the first slide initially, right? Now, drugs which are administered by intravenous route, they do not require absorption, right? The drugs which are administered either by oral route or other than oral route, except IV, they require absorption. Either you give subcutaneous, intramuscular, or any intradermal or any other route, absorption of the drug to the bloodstream is required. To measure the degree of absorption of a parameter we use is bioavailability. Don't worry much. I'm going to talk about bioavailability repeatedly in today's lecture and the second lecture and the third lecture as well, yeah, so that you grasp this concept very well. So to measure the degree of absorption, we use a term or a parameter known as bioavailability. I think the term itself is quite self-explanatory, isn't it? Bio refers to biological system. Availability means how much is available. So out of the administered amount, how much is available to the biological system, right? So let me define bioavailability. Bioavailability is the extent to which a dose of drug reaches its site of action or systemic circulation unchanged. This is one of the key terms. Yeah, I have highlighted the key term, the extent to which the site of action and in unchanged form. What do we mean by unchanged form? The drug may undergo metabolism after absorption, but what is the proportion of the drug that reaches the circulation in unchanged form? That is counted as bioavailability, right? How do we calculate bioavailability? By comparing the plasma level of the drug after administration via any route compared to IV route. Yeah, and this is, I think, quite easy to understand because you know that once you give the drug intravenously, the entire amount is bioavailable, right? So 100% is the bioavailability when you give by intravenous route. That's why you always compare the plasma level of a drug by any route other than IV route with that obtained after IV route. Right? So administration by any other route is always less than 100%. Doesn't matter even if you give subcutaneous, intramuscular, some amount of metabolism occurs while the drug passes through the tissues. Right? Any questions up to this point? No. All right. So I'm explaining a bit more about bioavailability here, taking an example of the oral administration, right? So what this diagram shows to you is that the drug is orally administered and here is the gut represented. So part of the administered drug unchanged may pass out into the feces, right? So some of the drug gets absorbed and passes through the gut wall. When it passes through the gut wall, again, some drug may get metabolized by the enzyme. Then it enters the portal circulation and some amount again gets metabolized in the liver. And whatever is left over goes into systemic circulation, giving you what we say bioavailability, right? But if you give the drug intravenously, what you do is you administer the entire amount directly into the bloodstream, giving you 100% bioavailability when it is given by IV route, right? So this is what I explained to you. This is a process through which a drug goes. When you give orally, after administration, it is destroyed in the gut, it is destroyed in the gut wall, it is destroyed in the liver, and the rest reaches the systemic circulation. And this process is what is known as first pass metabolism. Yeah. What is the meaning of first pass metabolism? The metabolism that a drug undergoes during its first passage from the site of administration to systemic circulation. Is it clear? I want to hear yes or no.
Yes, doctor, it's clear.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
doctor.
Okay, good. So in this example, if 100 milligram of the drug was administered and what reaches into blood is 50 milligram, I'm sure you know that bioavailability of this drug is only 50%. Right? Don't worry if you have certain difficulties here understanding. I'll come back to bioavailability again in the next lecture. Right? Okay. So what are the factors that can affect bioavailability? The molecular weight, of course, the larger molecular weight is difficult to get absorbed. The formulation in which you administer the drug. Formulation means what? If you have gone through the introductory lecture, you know what I mean by formulation. Either it is tablet or liquid. So liquid preparations release drug molecules much easier than the tablet and capsule. So they are much faster absorbed, may give you a better bioavailability. Okay. Lipid solubility, pKa, I have already explained to you. Gastric emptying time, yeah. So gastric emptying time is one of the factor that can affect drug absorption. If gastric emptying time is prolonged, it may delay the drug absorption. Food, especially the fatty food, because fatty food prolongs your gastric emptying time. Intestinal motility, let's say if somebody has diarrhea or excessive intestinal motility, drug may pass out before it can get adequately absorbed. Any other diseases of the absorptive surface will also reduce or interfere with the bioavailability of a drug. Route of administration, of course. You already know orally administered drug have lesser bioavailability. Polypharmacy, what I mean by polypharmacy is administration of several drugs together. Later you will know that a lot of drugs interfere with the absorption of other drugs. Yeah, so that is what happens when we administer several drugs together. Okay, another term which is quite often used is bioequivalence when we talk about absorption of drugs. So let me explain to you what is bioequivalence. I think the term itself is explanatory. Equivalence means equal, right? So means equal bioavailability of a drug when it is administered in two similar formulation, meaning solid-solid or liquid-liquid at the same molar dose under similar experimental conditions, or in other words, product B should be equal to product A in its pharmacokinetics and therefore will have the same therapeutic effect. So what does all this mean? Let's take an example of Panadol or paracetamol, right? So different companies have their paracetamol in different formulation, right? They are sold as Crocin, they are sold as Panadol or some other formulations, right? So if product A and product B, they give you an equal bioavailability, we will say that these two products are bioequivalent and you would expect a similar therapeutic effect when used in clinical practice. Clear?
Doctor, so does that mean that if you were to say take a generic brand Panadol paracetamol and you take the brand name Panadol, their
Yeah.
clinical effects would be the same.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So whenever a new product comes for the same drug, it has to undergo bioequivalence studies to show that its bioavailability is equal to, let's say, 500 milligram tablet of Panadol gives an equal bioavailability of a new formulation or the tablet formulation of paracetamol. Clear?
So, doctor,
Yes, doctor.
does that mean bioequivalence basically means that product A and product B have very similar therapeutic effects, but it can never be 100% the same, right?
Never. No, what we are talking about here is pharmacokinetic. Let's say for product A has 50% bioavailability, right? Product B also has 50% bioavailability. You would expect that they will both produce the same effect if your experimental conditions do not change. Is it clear?
Yes, thank you, doctor.
Yeah, but in patients, yes, of course, you might expect different effects because there are individual variations in terms of pharmacodynamics as well. You have not learned pharmacodynamics so far. You will learn about it, but pharmacodynamics is all about how drugs affect the body, right? So pharmacodynamics may differ from one individual to the other. So that may be a cause of differences, but not pharmacokinetics if they have equal bioavailability. Clearer?
Yes, doctor.
Yes,
All
doctor.
right. Okay, great. Okay, so let me add on some of the learning points here, which I have explained you on the previous slide. I am not reading the previous ones, right? So what I additionally explained to you, bioavailability is the fraction of administered drug that reaches the systemic circulation in unchanged form. Don't worry about AUC, I will explain to you in the next lecture. Orally given drugs undergo first pass metabolism. So do the drugs by other routes of administration, though to a lesser extent. Here I'm talking about other routes means the drugs administered by intradermal, subcutaneous, intramuscular, and other routes, right? Bioequivalence means two products of the same drug with equal bioavailability, right? Okay, so that was all about absorption. Any questions? No. All right. So let me move on now to distribution. And here we are talking about the distribution of drug from blood to various organs, right? Up until blood, it was absorption. From blood to various organs, it's all about distribution, right? So the drug distribution actually depends on the physicochemical properties of the drugs. That means drug with which polarity do you think will have a more extensive tissue distribution? Answers. If you have understood the concept, you can answer this question. Drugs with which polarity are likely
Non-polar?
to have? Sorry?
Is it non-polar?
Non-polar, exactly, or lipophilic. Okay, good, very good. And higher the blood flow to an organ, higher will be the amount of drug that reaches it. Is self-explanatory, isn't it? More blood flow, more drug reaching that organ. Capillary permeability. Some organs have tight junctions between lining capillary cells and drug is not allowed to freely enter the organ. I gave you some example in the beginning. Blood-brain barrier, placental barrier, or blood-retinal barrier are the examples. And here again, the polarity of a drug makes a difference. That means drugs with lipid solubility have a greater chance of crossing into the brain. Okay. Degree of drug binding to plasma proteins. I will explain to you what do we mean by plasma protein, but I hope the first 3 points are clear to everyone. Okay. So let us talk more about. Yeah, any question?
No, doctor, I just said yes.
Okay, great. So now let's talk a bit more about protein binding. Now, in general, acidic drugs tend to bind. You know that plasma is rich in proteins, isn't it? Albumin, glycoproteins, globulins, right? So acidic drugs, they tend to bind with albumins. Basic drugs tend to bind with alpha-1 acid glycoproteins, whereas hormones tend to bind with gamma globulins. Now, what is the implication of this binding? Very simple diagram here to explain. What you see here in the pink circles are the plasma protein, and drug is represented here as blue circles, right? So when you see that the drug is mostly bound to plasma protein, you see very little of it reaching into the tissues, right? But when the drug is less bound to plasma protein, more of it gets into the tissue. So what is the message I'm trying to give to you using this diagram? I'm trying to tell you that it is the free form of the drug. That means the form of the drug which is not bound to plasma proteins is free to move into the tissues. The part of the drug which is bound to protein cannot move into the tissues, right? So it is the free form of the drug that passes into the tissue and is the active form of the tissue. So what is the role of plasma protein binding? Plasma protein binding, or the bound form of the drug, acts like a reservoir. Right? So as the drug into the tissue gets utilized, more and more drug from the plasma protein gets released, and only the free form gets into the tissues, right? So let me use an example here. If there are 1,000 molecules of a drug in blood and 99% of the drug is protein bound, you would expect that only one molecule of it is free. Now, by any means, let's say because of certain diseases or because of any other condition, this 99.9% binding changes to 90%, you would expect that 100 molecules of this drug are free in circulation to move out into tissue, right? So basically what has happened here, there is a 100-fold increase in the free pharmacologically active form. So the drug which was effective at this concentration actually becomes toxic when the protein binding has changed to 90%, right? So this is clinically relevant only for drugs that have very high protein binding. For example, this drug which has got 99.9% binding, not so much of clinical importance for drugs that are poorly protein bound, for example, 30% or 40% or 50%. But those that are highly protein bound, they may show some toxic effect if their protein binding changes. And there are a lot of implications. There will be a lot of examples that we will give you later. But for example, a drug can replace another drug if they compete for the same protein binding, resulting into its reduced protein binding and increase in the free pharmacologically active form, and resulting into more pronounced pharmacological effect or the toxic effects, right? Okay, so what are additional learning points? Once into the systemic circulation, drugs are distributed to various organs depending on the physicochemical nature, depending on the blood supply, depending on the capillary permeability. Drugs also bind to plasma proteins, and remember, only free form is the active form of the drug. Displacement of drugs that are highly protein bound may result into toxic effects. Any questions?
Sorry, doctor, I have one. With the plasma protein binding, does that influence the bioavailability of a drug?
No. Again, you see, when I'm talking about bioavailability, refer to the definition. We are talking about absorption of the drug from site of administration into blood, right? Now, plasma protein binding is going to affect drug distribution only in case when the drug has a very high protein binding. It's not going to affect the absorption of the drug, isn't it?
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes, go on.
So the plasma protein binding does not happen for all type of drugs, right?
This is this is chemical nature of drugs. Certain drugs are highly protein bound, certain drugs are partially protein bound, certain drugs do not bind with protein at all.
Okay, so this scenario is created because if 100% of the drug is to pass through, it could cause toxicity.
This is just an example to show to you for drugs that have very high protein binding. You will get certain examples later when we go into systemic pharmacology. Yeah, you will come across a lot of examples that have very high protein binding.
Okay, thank you, doctor.
All right. Okay.
Doctor?
Yeah. Yeah.
So does that mean that if the drug is highly protein bound, right, it gets bound to the plasma more, that means it won't distribute as much into the tissues because it's bind
Yeah,
to
you are
the
getting
protein?
it right. Yeah. This is particularly important for drugs that have high protein binding. So it's a very simple logical thing to understand. What you said is absolutely right. Drugs that tend to stay in the blood will not go out into tissues. Am I making sense?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. On the other hand, if I compare drug A and B, right, you give them in the same amount. Let's assume that they have same bioavailability and excretion as well, right? But plasma level of one drug is lower, much lower than the other. The one which has lower level is going to get distributed into blood, into tissues, compared to the one which has got a high plasma level. I'll talk about distribution again in the next lecture today. All right? Okay. Is that clear?
Doctor,
Yes,
I have a question.
Yeah.
So basically for drugs which are high protein bound, it's because they stay into the bloodstream and they are not easily going into the tissues. That is why they produce toxic effects.
No, this is not about, as I told you, toxic effect will be produced only by the free form of the drug. When the free form of the drug reaches the tissue, then only you would expect a toxic effect. Isn't it?
So the one that doesn't bind to the protein is the one that causes toxic effects, right?
No, again, you control the doses, isn't it? You do not give, indiscriminately. So the doses are designed in a way that give you an optimum blood level, which is required to produce a certain effect, right? So if a patient has got a disease condition that results into change in the concentration of plasma proteins, or there are other factors involved, then the doses are modified accordingly. Clearer?
Doctor?
Yeah.
But
yes, go on.
A highly protein bound drug, how can it be toxic in the blood or tissues if it's bound to the protein?
Yeah, when it is bound to protein, when we say it's highly protein bound, doesn't mean it's 100% protein bound, right? Part of it will be certainly in the free form, which is which will pass into tissues, right? So once the tissues use that small portion, more of it will be released from the plasma proteins, because as I said, plasma protein binding serves as a reservoir. Anyway, you give the drugs to act on the tissues. You don't give drugs to make them stay in the blood, isn't it?
Yeah, so if even the little bit that is the free form is toxic, why are we administering the drug?
Sorry, so I don't get your point. Can you repeat that?
I said if even the small the percentage that makes it to the tissue, even if it's a small percentage and it's still toxic, so why are we giving the drug?
No. You are getting the point incorrect. Yeah. What I said here on this slide is that this is normally the protein binding is, which gives you one free molecule, and this is already effective. So you give it a dose that gives you this concentration. You don't have to give a larger dose. But in a disease condition, or because of any other reason, in case your plasma protein binding changes to 90%, you are making the drug released into a larger quantity in the free form. Then only it's going to be toxic.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
All right. I think the concept will be much more clearer as we move ahead. Yeah. So far, is it all right?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now I'm moving on to drug metabolism. Okay. Let us try and understand what do we mean by metabolism. Metabolism means the chemical modification of drugs with an overall goal of getting rid of it. Body doesn't want to keep it forever, right? So it metabolizes drugs, and those which are lipid soluble are converted into a water soluble form. Why in the water soluble forms? So that they can dissolve in urine and can be excreted out. right? So metabolism involves a lot of enzymes. And what actually happens is when drug undergoes metabolism, a more polar molecule gets converted into a water-soluble drug, and then it can be excreted out. That is the overall goal of metabolism, right? And what are the sites of metabolism? Liver is the main site of the metabolism, as I have highlighted here. Other sites can be intestine, kidney, skin, lungs, plasma, and other organs of the body. And inside the cell, cytoplasm, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which is also known as microsomes, mitochondria, lysosomes, all are these sites where metabolism of a drug can take place. All right. Now, for the purpose of discussion, we can divide metabolic reactions.
Doctor?
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat what is microsomes again? Is it referring to the
Microsomes
SER?
are the smooth endoplasmic reticulum.
So just another name for it, is it?
Yes, it is another name. Yeah. Usually, rough endoplasmic reticulum carries ribosomes on it, isn't it?
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so smooth endoplasmic reticulum is also known as microsomes. Okay, so metabolic reactions can be phase 1 metabolic reactions or phase 2 metabolic reactions, and both of them they are meant to convert a lipophilic molecule into a polar metabolite, and they can come one after another, meaning that one doesn't mean that it has to come first followed by 2. Some of the drug actually can undergo phase 2 metabolism and then undergo phase 1 metabolism, right? So 1 and 2 doesn't mean that they come one after another, all right? So let us try and understand what happens in phase 1 metabolism. And
just to clarify, 1 and 2 both need to happen, right?
Sorry, what's that?
Phase 1 and phase 2 of metabolism both need to occur, right?
Not necessarily. Some drugs undergo only phase 1 metabolism. Some drugs may undergo only phase 2 metabolism. Some drugs undergo both metabolism. Some drugs do not undergo metabolism at all. They are just excreted unchanged. All right?
All right, doctor. Thank you.
Okay. We will give you a lot of examples of this variation. Okay, so what is phase 1 metabolism? Phase 1 metabolism is a kind of reaction where polar groups which are already present in the molecule get exposed, or a new polar group is introduced into the molecule, right? And the examples include oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis. These are the examples of type 1 reaction, and mainly the enzymes which are involved are the cytochrome enzymes or microsomal enzymes or cytochrome P50 enzymes. They are one and the same thing, right? CYP450, CY is the short form for cytochrome, right? And P450 is the type of enzyme. So these are the enzymes commonly involved for type 1 reactions. And these enzymes can be stimulated or inhibited by various drugs. This is an important concept here. Some drugs can actually cause stimulation of these enzymes. So what do we mean by stimulation? When an enzyme is stimulated, it's going to increase the rate of metabolism of the drugs, right? And if an enzyme is inhibited, the rate of metabolism will reduce. Okay? This is going to affect the plasma concentration of the drug. If the drug metabolism gets stimulated, you would expect that its plasma level will reduce. On the other hand, if the microsomal enzyme or the metabolizing enzymes are inhibited, you would expect that its plasma level is rising, right? So if there are specific situations, one has to modify the dose so that the patient doesn't experience toxic effect if the enzymes are inhibited, or doesn't lose the therapeutic effect if the enzymes are stimulated, right?
Sorry,
Doctor.
Yes.
I also have a question. What about the drugs that are only active once they have been metabolized?
Sorry, what's that?
So what about the drugs that are only they only produce therapeutic effects once they have been metabolized?
Drugs that do not produce? Sorry, I'm not getting your question.
So with the drugs that only have effects once they have been metabolized, how does that affect the enzymes?
You mean the drugs that do not undergo metabolism, is it?
No, they need metabolism.
Drugs that need metabolism, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are certain drugs that increase their own metabolism once they stimulate the enzyme. And after, what happens, like you are giving a 50 milligram of the drug, let's say, just giving you an example to start with, right? And this drug shows you a very good effect. After certain time, because the enzymes are stimulated, it gets its own metabolism going on much faster. So the 50 milligram is not effective anymore. You have to increase its dose to experience the same effect. Am I making
That makes
myself?
sense. Thank you, doctor.
Yeah, the same thing happen sometimes if the drug is inhibiting the enzyme. Yeah, in that case, it will inhibit even its own metabolism, not just the other drugs. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I have another question. Sorry.
Yes.
The aim of metabolism is to make polar metabolites, but what if the drug's already polar? Does it undergo less metabolism than non?
Yeah, they don't need. Yeah, there are certain drugs that don't need any metabolism.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on to phase 2 metabolism. A molecule endogenous to the body donates a portion of itself to the foreign molecule, which is drug in this case, and we call them synthetic reaction, and they are usually, yeah, not all, but usually they are non-microsomal, right? So here I have represented here, drug molecule receives a part of an endogenous molecule to form a polar substance, which can be easily excreted, leaving behind the endogenous molecule. Okay, so because a new substance is synthesized here, we call it synthetic reaction, and this kind of reaction do not require microsomal enzyme, and they require generally transferase enzyme. There is a transfer happening here, right? So that is why it's known as transferase enzyme. Some of the examples I have listed here: glucuronidation, sulfate conjugation, acetylation, glycine conjugation, methylation, glutathione conjugation. They are all require some endogenous substances for driving phase 2 metabolic reactions, right? So what are the effects and the factors affecting? Yeah, so what are the effects of drug metabolism? The number one and most important is termination of drug action. Yeah, because the drug is facilitated for its excretion, so the drug action is terminated. There are certain drugs which are actually, when administered, are pro-drugs. Yeah, that means they are not the active form of the drugs. Once they are metabolized, then only they become active. There are few examples of this kind of drug. So sometimes the drug gets activated only after it is metabolized. You will come across certain examples of that. A lot of factors affect drug metabolism. For example, age. Neonates cannot metabolize certain drugs as efficiently as the adults can do because their enzymes are not saturated. Gender differences are there. For example, females cannot metabolize alcohol as effectively as males do. There are genetic variations. Some people have a higher expression of certain enzymes compared to others, so they will have a different rate of metabolism. Diseases affect the metabolism. Substrate competition can happen. That means if two drugs are administered that utilize the same enzyme, they will compete for it and can either they can inhibit the metabolism of the other drug. Route of drug administration, I'm sure you have understood how various drugs, various routes of drug administration can affect the metabolic reactions. Enzyme induction and inhibition, as I explained to you on the previous slide. All right. Oops, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so repeated administration of the drug, what should be your answer here? Repeated administration of a drug may increase its own metabolism, may increase the metabolism of other drugs, may increase the metabolism of endogenous compounds, all of the above. What's the correct choice here? Anyone?
Would it be all of the above?
Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, because these enzymes do not metabolize a particular drug. They metabolize a range of substances, including endogenous substances and a variety of drugs, right? So the answer here, the correct answer here should be all of the above. Okay, So let me add on the learning points, what we have learned over the last few slides. Drugs are metabolized mainly in the liver via phase 1 and phase 2 metabolic reactions, which are complementary to each other, not mutually exclusive. Right? Repeated administration of a drug may cause induction or inhibition of the metabolized enzyme, and this particularly applies to phase 1 reactions. All right, any questions before I move on to the last part of this lecture, and then we will do a few questions. Hopefully, I'm left with some time.
Sorry, doctor. The purpose of metabolism is to make the excretion of a drug easier, right?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
Miss, could you please repeat what a prodrug is?
Prodrug is a drug which it is the form of the drug in which it is administered, but it is inactive, pharmacologically inactive. Only after it undergoes metabolism, that means its chemical structure changes after metabolism. And then the new chemical structure is the active form of the drug. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay. So now we are moving on to drug excretion. We have learned about absorption, distribution, metabolism, and this is the last part. Nothing in detail. Very simple things I want to tell you here. Excretion means the passage out of the systemically absorbed drug. Drugs and their metabolites, they are largely excreted. In the urine is the main route of excretion, feces as well. But other routes include exhaled air. Some of the drugs are exhaled out. Some of the drugs may be excreted in saliva, sweat, or milk, right? But the major route of excretion is urine and feces, right? So renal excretion of drugs, most drugs are excreted in urine. The kidney functions involved in the process include glomerular filtration, passive tubular reabsorption, as well as tubular secretion. All right. So I will not go into detail of these processes. You will learn them elsewhere, but these are basic processes happening in the kidney which allow the drug to get excreted. But drugs which have larger molecular weight undergo biliary excretion. And biliary excretion quite often involves active transport. So what do we mean by biliary excretion? This is excretion of drug in bile. So what is the implication of biliary excretion? I hope I can explain to you on this slide here. What you see here, the drug is getting absorbed via portal circulation, right? As I explained to you earlier, it goes into liver and it undergoes metabolism here, and via bile duct is excreted back into the intestine. Intestine has got a lot of bacteria which produce, for example, enzymes. One of the example is beta-glucuronidase. So these enzymes, they metabolize or they break down the metabolized drug and convert it back into its active form, which again gets absorbed into portal circulation. The cycle gets repeated again and again, and we call it enterohepatic circulation. Entero refers to gut, is enterohepatic refers to liver, right? So from gut to liver, from liver to gut, and back from gut to liver. That is what is known as enterohepatic circulation. And enterohepatic circulation increases the half-life of the drug. Don't worry about the half-life. I'll talk about half-life in the next lecture. I will not explain half-life in this lecture, right? So don't worry about half-life. I'll talk about it in the next lecture. But I hope you understand what do we mean by biliary excretion and what is enterohepatic circulation. Clear to everybody?
Sorry, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Does the drug actually combines with the bile when it's excreted out again?
Bile has got a lot of substances. One of the substances is glucuronide, right? So let's say morphine. Morphine will bind with glucuronide for morphine glucuronide, right? And once it is excreted in the kidney, in the gut, bacterial enzymes will metabolize it back to morphine, and morphine again gets absorbed.
So it's like a constant cycle that's happening in
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, partial excretion will of course happen. It's not that the entire amount is getting reabsorbed again and again, but yes, partially it gets.
I see. All right, thank you, doctor.
Welcome. Do we have time, guys? How much time do we have?
Actually, it's already 12:53, doctor.
Oh, okay. I had a few questions. You all want to leave now, is it?
You can do the questions because I think some people in the call right now actually do have questions on the previous slides. So if that's all right with you, could we continue?
Okay. All right. So let us continue with the question. I won't take much time, but maybe this will be a bit helpful. Okay, let me put it on. Okay, very briefly and very quickly. You can come back to me if you have any questions. So here are some more learning points I have added. Drugs are mainly excreted in urine or bile. Some drugs undergo enterohepatic circulation, not all. All right. So passive transport of a drug across cell membrane depends on density of transporters. Is it true or false? Quickly, give me answers.
False.
False. Yeah, you don't need transporters for passive transfusion. Passive diffusion, right? Ability of a drug to enter brain depends on its lipid solubility.
True.
True, correct. Which drugs are absorbed through endocytosis? Water soluble, lipid soluble, macromolecular.
Is it macromolecular?
Macromolecular. Very good. Microsomal oxidation of drugs occurs only in liver.
Is that false?
It's false. Certainly false. Yeah. All glucuronides produced in liver are excreted in feces.
False.
False, because some of them may undergo enterohepatic circulation. In a patient with impaired liver function, the plasma concentration of the administered drug, which is metabolized in liver, is likely to reduce.
False.
False. It is likely to increase, right? After undergoing metabolism, drugs may get activated.
True.
Yeah, they may be prodrugs. Microsomal metabolism always precedes the conjugation reactions. False. That's correct. In barbiturate poisoning, alkalinization of urine helps in its excretion. Barbiturates are acidic drugs. False or true?
True.
This is true. This is true. Now imagine your acidic drug in alkaline medium will be more in ionized form, isn't it? So once it is in the ionized form, it will not be absorbed. It will be excreted out in urine, isn't it?
So, Miss, is this an example of ion trapping?
Yes, this is again an example of ion trapping. Absolutely right. Clear?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, good. A highly polar drug is unlikely to cause direct fetal adverse effects.
Is
True or false?
True.
Highly polar drug will not produce is unlikely. Yeah, that's true. The most important characteristic of a drug to be absorbed after oral administration is which one?
Ability to pass through cell membrane.
Exactly. Okay. The reason that irrespective of the pH, any drug gets absorbed mostly in the intestine is more surface area, long residence time, both together, or alkaline pH.
Most of the cereal.
The third one?
Number 3, yeah, large surface area as well as long residence time. Even the acidic drugs, you see, you have to differentiate between two terms, better absorbed and mostly absorbed. If I ask you an acidic drug is better absorbed in stomach or intestine, your answer should be stomach. But if I'm saying where it is mostly absorbed, your answer is in intestine, because intestine has very large surface area and long residence time. Is it clear? Yeah, no confusion, huh? Okay, the absorption of ionized drug molecules through cell membranes can be facilitated by pH opposite to the nature of the drug, addition of a polar group, or addition of a non-polar group.
Is it the addition of a non-polar group?
Non-polar. Good. Drugs like insulin have zero oral bioavailability.
Is it true?
True, yeah. Any protein drug. Insulin is a protein. It will be digested by your juices, right? So they have like zero oral bioavailability. The lipid-soluble drug is more likely to produce CNS effect than a water-soluble drug.
True.
True. A fat-rich meal may slow down the drug absorption.
True.
True. Acidic drugs like aspirin are better absorbed in stomach.
True.
Drug administered by subcutaneous route do not undergo first-pass metabolism.
False.
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 This must be false. I told you that other than IV route, all drugs undergo first-pass metabolism by other routes, isn't it? Yeah. I think this is the last one. What you see here, drug A and B, they are both lipophilic. Yeah, they are both lipophilic. They are both small. You see the difference in the protein binding. Tissue binding is same, bioavailability is same, and their elimination is same. So which one applies here? The tissue distribution of drug A would be greater than B, or that of B would be greater than A, or drug B would achieve higher plasma concentration than A if administered at the same dose and route. What should be your answer here?
The second statement, the tissue distribution of drug B will be greater than
Absolutely right. Yeah, so I can see that you have understood the concept very well. So this is what I was talking today, how the stuff reaches the site of action, right? And there are certain, okay, this link is not working anymore for you all to give feedback, but I certainly welcome your feedback, and this really helps me to improve or to change what most suits the students. So I really welcome everybody's input. Yeah, so do give me your feedback. Was the lecture well understood, or there was something that were not clear? And I will try to rectify it for the next cohort. Yeah, your input is very important for me, and I will see you again shortly. In the next lecture. And there are certain videos that I have uploaded to explain to you certain concepts. Anyone saw those videos? Okay, never mind. You can see it again after my lecture, or if you have time before my lecture, so that you understand few of the pharmacokinetic lectures well. So I think we can end the lectures here and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, doctor.
Thanks.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.